Hi, so today I'm gonna talk about something that's been bugging me a little bit lately. It's a bit rambly and a bit random. I don't have a script or anything, so apologies if this is a bit long. But one thing that I've been thinking about recently is that a lot of people that I've spoken to have massive problems reading. And I don't mean literal, like, dyslexic problems, like, it's not just dyslexic people, but a lot of people struggle actually reading. But it's more the sort of motivation and the reason why people don't read. And this is something that I've noticed. Like, recently I feel like a lot of people use all these different things, like social media, and are always constantly on their phone or watching YouTube videos or whatever, which is fine. But if you're watching this, I really think it's important to read more, or put aside a couple of hours, maybe 1 hour a day, 30 minutes, whatever, just to get into the rhythm of reading. Like, I understand more than anyone else how difficult it can be to read. I'm dyslexic, and I remember one time sitting in the library just trying to read, and I just could not muster enough concentration. And it is a bit about willpower as well, because you really have to stick to sort of the practice of reading. Like, also another thing that I realised is people give up reading because of one book, and this can be really irritating. Not irritating, but like, I just want to shake people sometimes and just say to them how important it is to read, and how much I've learned recently. I mean, kind of recently, the last 2 years really, I've started to read properly, like a book a month or something like that. And admittedly, there's some times where I can't be bothered, I'm not in the practice of doing it. There's often books that I read that are really difficult and I give up, and that's fine. I think there's a stigma with reading that you have to understand every word, you have to know everything that happens in a book, you have to never give up on a book, because it's just one of those weird things. But of course there's some books you're not going to like. That's the same with a film. You might not like every film there is out there. It's exactly the same thing. One other thing I feel like is sort of not really an excuse, but why people don't read as well, is because people don't enjoy it. I mean, there's too much competition, because why read when you can watch? Why read a book that will take a month and a half to read when you can watch it in an hour, in 2 hours, whatever? And it's just so sad to me, because I've started to, like, usually most books that I read, I think almost every book that I've read that there's been a film adaptation or TV series adaptation that I know of, I've watched the film or TV adaptation first, because it's just a lot easier, and I feel like it's a good way of grounding yourself in the world, of that film. But rarely is there something in a film that you don't get in a book. That's just the truth. An example of this might be in fictional books. Point of view, I think, is quite important, because it shows what people are thinking, which I think is really important, because people's actions and people's motives are quite often different. So having that, and then also things that encapsulate the world that you're reading. George R. R. Martin is a great example of this, as Song of Ice and Fire, the world building in that series is incredible, and it's just interesting to see how much more you get to see of it in the books. You know, in the TV series, you don't get a look into the scale of the world, what people are thinking, some of the mysteries behind some things, because you know you can't always show that, you know, especially if a character is pretending to be another character. You would know straight away if it's the same actor. But if you have a more conceptual idea of this character and it turns out to be someone else that you know, it really adds different elements to it. I would say that's what books usually have over films. I mean, there's one example, a couple of examples, but one that sticks in my mind is the Roadside Picnic book, where, don't get me wrong, it's an incredible book, but the film is also incredible. And what the book obviously can't ever have is the visual side of it, and what the film can't have is the more metaphysical side, the mental state of these characters. So in a way they both complement each other. I wouldn't say that one is better than the other. The amount of extra things you get, in my opinion, is colossal. You mean, if you look at Game of Thrones, for instance, that's my hamster in the background. If you see Game of Thrones and compare it with The Song of Ice and Fire, for me it's a tiny portion of it. I mean, the season 1 was great, but after that I feel like so much was lost from it and so much was changed that it's not really the same thing. I still think the TV show is great, but it's nowhere near the same quality. And it's just sad how people talk about, like, I rarely have conversations about The Song of Ice and Fire with people because people just don't bother reading it. And I think it's really sad, because my hamster's making a lot of sound, because it's so important for people to read, and for people not to feel sort of like they have to read, but for people to do it because they want to read, because they want to learn. I think the purpose of this video for me is just to tell people that it's okay to struggle with books, it's okay to not like books. But it's a bit like going to the gym. Like, of course there's going to be days where you don't feel like going and you don't have to go, but it's a bit, you need to sort of get into the routine of doing it, in my opinion, especially if you have the time. If you don't have the time, like, even if you do 10 minutes a day, I mean, you can do it on the tube, there is time, but you just need to dedicate it to that, and you need to see that it's important. I remember one of my friends, I'm not going to name them, but said that reading is pointless if there's a TV adaptation, and I think that is the wrongest thing you can say, because even if the TV series, even if you prefer the film or TV series than the books, you get something from the book, because you learn. You might not see it consciously in the same way you can learn other things, but you learn a lot. And I think it's really important that people see this. So next week I'm going to be doing a video of my top 10 books. I understand that a lot of people might not enjoy these books, but I think this is something that it's personal to me, and I think if people can see that, how passionate I am about the books that I read, and maybe that might inspire them to go on their own journey and find their own books. I mean, I have the most random list of books, that I conjured up today, and they're not, like, 2 of them aren't similar in any way, so I guess it's just all about finding your own taste in books and enjoying them. That's the main thing. I hope this has inspired you to pick up a book. I've added some of my favourite images from films that I really like that I've read as books. It might seem a random order of images that I've put on the screen. I think it's something important that a lot of people aren't talking about. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.